And we're live. There we go. Hey everyone, Brian, Tiny Crypto Blog. So today, I saw a clip the other day from TCFC about private money in Argentina. I thought it was interesting and wanted to share this with you because I had some thoughts about this as far as probabilities, possibilities, and what we might be looking at for the future of money. So I'm going to cut right into it and get the video going. I'll put a link in the show notes once this goes fully posted. Let's see where we go.
As Mark mentioned earlier, he's on the board of Satellogic, involved with a lot of these other companies. Mercado Libre itself is very much interfaced with Paxos, PayPal, and groups like that. And it's sort of like what happened earlier, what I mentioned earlier about those figures, sort of king making the corporate titans of Latin America. So this is like a modern iteration of that with like the same players. They're funding these startups and ensuring which companies get big and if they succeed, but their endeavors not an Argentinian entity. It's an entity run by people like Edgar Bronfman and Reid Hoffman. And so there's an Endeavor Argentina branch, and pretty much all of these companies that we discuss in the piece that are based in Argentina are part of this Endeavor Argentina network. And Argentina is where I would argue, are going to test out a lot of these efforts. Most likely under Milei, because he's very amenable to these kinds of policies. And so one of these figures that that comes up a lot in the piece, this Diego Gutierrez, he's one of the co-founders of RSK of Rootstock. He gave this very revealing interview about a year ago, and he was talking about several things that I think are important to bring up in the context of this interview. One of them is that as Bitcoin becomes integrated into Wall Street, Bitcoin has to shed its ethos, as he called it. Essentially, it has to stop being a tool of dissent, a threat to both commercial and central banks, and essentially become their tool. That's what he says. So for Bitcoin to succeed, in his eyes, that has to happen. So that's very telling. And then he also says that there's going to be a concerted push to move away from money printed by the state, meaning central banks, and instead move to commodity-backed stable coins where the people that own the commodities will have all the power. I think that's very interesting because obviously Milei, in his case, right, came to power framing himself as very libertarian, but his policies thus far have shown him to be very crony capitalist, in my opinion. We talked about this before, and Mark brought up some stuff, to that point. But keep in mind too that a lot of the people in his government are from J.P. Morgan, for example, or the Argentinian branch of major Wall Street banks. He's been very closey with people like Fink and Musk, as discussed, among others. And
so right there, you have a situation where the dots connect. It's not coincidence. Now, granted, there could be a case of, hey, we need people of knowledge, expertise, and connections who can make things happen, because that's how things work. You have people and relationships to make things happen. At the same time, too, you add these other dots to the picture, and it's like, okay, we could see how if you have someone influencing the person who controls the levers of power, who has the most influence or a great amount of influence on how the rules get made, you get a situation where, hey, we could try doing this here. Going on.
And very friendly with like Zelensky and the Ukraine. So, I mean, this is not a very libertarian guy under other metrics. And there's been a lot of, antagonism with him in Argentina's central bank, which of course is responsible for a lot of bad stuff that has happened in Argentina. But people also here, which as a lot of this fiscal trouble for Argentina began when it was run by US and CIA-backed military coup, then under Carlos Menem, who was the great, I say this great, not in the actually like, oh, that was great sense, like big, I guess, the big neoliberal in Argentina, recent political history, who was basically just like a goon for, US, foreign interests really to like gobble up Argentinian resources. Milei is a big fan of Menem, and some of the people that are in his government started their political careers under Menem, like Patricia Bullrich, the interior minister, for example. So, you could really frame Milei as a continuation of that stuff, because Mauricio Macri, a lot of people in Milei's government are from the Macri government, especially his economics team. There's a direct line to all of that.
So here's another question too that it begs. Okay, putting aside the money issue we're discussing today, and I apologize, I bulldozed into this thing. Whitney Webb, if you're not familiar with her, if you look her up, I forget if she's a solo operation or part of something a little bit bigger, but she's done a lot of deep diving and a lot of digging into relationships between people in high places globally. So some of the things that she sees, they pan out. Some they do not. But she definitely has a good pulse as far as who's interacting with what. Maybe not so much the outcomes, but of possibilities, probabilities, and connecting dots. Anyway, going with the money, Malay going with these reforms, even if he does it under the libertarian banner, and even if they do fall into a less state-run and less highly structured type of thing, we still got to look at the pros and the cons. What are the net benefits for everyone, meaning everyone, and what benefits the narrow few? So time will tell on this, but something else to keep in mind. To go on.
And so I am very concerned that, that would be celebrated as like a big, yes, we.
River's the best place to buy Bitcoin. Go to river.com/TFT.
The central bank's not going to print the peso anymore. It's over, and he's saved Argentina. Well, is it really saving Argentina if he's, going to make, they're going to use dollar peg stable coins. They're regulating the credit of Bitcoin right now. They're going to move to this whole model of commodity-backed stable coins, which is already actually happening in Argentina. A company backed by Visa that's based in Argentina is tokenizing basically all of the country's grain deposits to use that as currency. So whoever owns all of the grains, and the biggest landowner is a big former backer of Mauricio Macri, part of Endeavor Argentina. His name is Eduardo Elstein. He owns all of the commodities. He's also a big shareholder of some of Israel's biggest companies. He's going to be the guy that basically controls the money then, right? At least with the grain-backed stable coins. So if you have all these oligarchs in charge of different industries, which is essentially what Argentina has been becoming and has been happening really everywhere around the world, who's going to be in charge of the money? Is that really better than the central bank having it? Because remember, the central bank's run by the commercial bank. So you're just getting, the same shit under a different, name, basically. I don't know. There's a lot of different stuff going on here, and it's going to be interesting to see how it develops, but, sorry, I'll let someone else talk. I've been rambling a while.
No, it's.
And there you go. You've had commercial banks, meaning via the central banks, doing what they do. So where can this go? If anything, take away connotations, you take away the key bono of who benefits, and just look at it from a purely logic and statistical point of view. Having these kinds of monies, commodity-backed currencies, well, if we have a much larger opening field of competing currencies, we might see incentives coming into play, meaning the incentive for, say, like in this case, a currency-backed stablecoin. Well, if someone tries doing funny monkey business and it starts threatening the value of these currencies, the endpoint situation is that it's going to hurt the underlying value, and people aren't going to want to use it, in which case they'll go to something else. So game theory may come into play on this, as far as any other currencies that come onto line, stable coins or centrally government sanctioned currencies. Game theory is going to be coming into play again. We're seeing the sovereign individual, the 1990s book, come into play, where there's more decentralization, there's more choices, and humanity is going from centralized everything to a much more decentralized world. And back, one of the examples given, it might have been in that one, or it might have been in the earlier book that the authors wrote, The Great Reckoning. I think Milan, if I'm remembering correctly, back in the 1400s, maybe 1300s, 1400s, when mercantilism was a growing thing and Europe was came out of the Dark Ages and the medieval ages. Milan had a solid currency. They used gold coins. They didn't devalue them. They didn't. I'm trying to think of the word where you further dilute the overall value of the coin by having less and less gold or silver in there, devalue essentially. And in a world of competing currencies, the florent, I think the unit was called, those were universal. Their currency was accepted as good money. So we might be entering a situation where the good money is coming to play. And right now we're seeing one of those iterations come into the marketplace, come into the human realm to find out, would a commodity-backed stablecoin be viable as a currency? And how does that need to be managed in order for it to be viable, in order for it to be worthwhile and something that people actually want to use? Because if it's we're forced to use it by writ of law, it's basically a fiat currency where it's no different than the US dollar or any other government issued and legislated currency today. It's just managed by someone else. I'll pick on. This might be all there is to it, but I'll barrel on. That last point that Whitney had was the main point coming around to this.
Amazing. I think the way you talk about sort of this establishment of, commodity-backed stable coins and money, it gets back to this idea of kind of what Marty was saying earlier. Well, there's still the Oracle problem. There's still all these issues of making a federated sidechain work. Well, then you look at, where did the money go? A lot of this research came from looking at VCs and looking at where the money came that, funded and founded these companies. And you look at, you talked about X. A lot of people forget Elon was heavily involved in PayPal, and X was, initially an idea that came out of the PayPal primordial goop. And we look at this PayPal mafia and how it spread everywhere. And this is the first idea of Bitcoin sidechains, where it was introduced in the sidechains paper in October 2014 by all of these blockchain employees led by Adam Back. The next month, weeks later, the seed round for Blockstream is led by Reid Hoffman. And what the sidechain concept did basically was allow Bitcoin to uphold other ledger assets and give the ability to transfer these assets between multiple blockchains and give new functions to assets that they already own. And you look at, okay, well then who was the money behind PayPal, and you look into it and you see who's the seed founder of PayPal, and you get this guy Bill Elkis. Bill Elkis was a former trustee of the Jeffrey Epstein Foundation.
So yeah, there we go. We could also look at, say, PayPal's stablecoin and see how that comes into play. Again, we're seeing essentially floating the marketplace of ideas, where we're seeing what's going to work, as well as the issuers. We're all finding out what's going to work and what's not. And it's going to be a very slow, long process of figuring things out that's going to take years to unfold. Maybe in some cases, months, who knows? In any case, that's what I wanted to get around to, and that's what I wanted to point out, because this is where we're headed. We're headed to a new world. And yeah, decentralization is the way. So with that, thank you for sticking around and watching. You can follow TinyCryptoBlog in all the social media sites listed in the show notes. And with that, be well, everyone. Talk to you soon. And we